Give me 500,000 because 500,000 is going to become 1.5 million for us. As marketers, are we as effective as possible with putting the right tools in place and keeping our variable costs really manageable and reasonable? If we do that, then it's easy for us to go back to the table and say, hey, look, we got really efficient pay-per-click stuff running. We got really efficient social media running. Yeah, maybe it might get $1 or $2 better cost per acquisition, but like we're really good. We're in the sweet spot. Now I do need more money from you. But for every $1 I spend, I'm going to make 5. So when my variable costs might go up, my profit line is still growing. Once you understand that concept, it makes it a lot easier to go back and talk about it and get approval to do things. You basically built a machine that is a profit machine and show that you're keeping the business as healthy as possible. The mistake a lot of marketers make, it's, hey, great, we need 500 new patients. We're not as efficient as we should be, but give me more money so I can go do that.
Well, Ryan, first, thank you for joining us today. Really excited to talk to you about this.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So maybe we can start by just talking a little bit about your background. Now, you and I know each other a little bit, so I understand it. But for our audience who may have not heard of your work before, how can they think about where you've kind of focused your career?
So, I mean, it's in the marketing and advertising side, which, at this point kind of bleeds into operations a little bit. So I'm the chief marketing officer over at Peak Dental Services, 60 plus offices in a couple different states. And have been in the dental space for the last 14 years or so. Prior to that was on the research and analytics side.
All right, so a data focus and then been in the dentist space for a while now. What do you think makes this space unique, this space when it comes to the marketing perspective around it?
Yeah, so I think what a lot of people probably don't know is you have groups that go out there, whether private equity or groups that form, and they buy up dental offices. Which is very good for the patient because it brings economies of scale for these places, but makes the care more affordable for the patient and gives them access to it. So that's the key. From a marketing standpoint, in the 14 years that I've been in this space, it's gone from, build a website, do pay-per-click. How do you try to target that individual, down to in like the last 5 years, getting really hyper-targeted with them because people see their dentist more transactional now. Mm-hmm. Hey, you can't get me in today. This is when I'm available for my appointment. I'm just going to go down to the next guy on the list until somebody can get me in. So as marketers, we've had to shift in that direction and, really get hyper-targeted with them and employ, like a lot of marketers, right, start employing AI and stuff like that to help figure it out.
That's interesting that you tap into the user behavior there because, I mean, I've noticed that as well, is that, you see these flashy new dentists popping up that seem to have more focus on the user experience, and you walk in and, you have you fill out all of your information on a tablet, or you have it's a very different experience than I remember 10 years ago, growing up, having braces, going to the dentist then. So when you think about how you focus your time today on scaling multiple locations, what are some of the key things that you focus on, and maybe an understanding around the metrics that you look at?
Yeah. So there's marketing and there's operations. And I always say, so if you're in this space, you're in healthcare, let's say, or dental, I call it MOPS, right? It's marketing and operations. And if you want to be successful, you're going to have to start understanding both pieces of it. And the reason for that is you got to go top of funnel to the bottom of the funnel. So what that really means as marketers, like you're mentioning metrics, right? They're going to talk about impressions and clicks and stuff like that. If you're the digital person and you're in the trenches doing it, you probably do have to pay attention. I personally don't really care because I've never been in a board meeting where they said, hey, have our impressions gone up? Give me the impression number. That conversation hasn't happened in the last 10 years. So for us, the good marketers, and when I kind of speak about it, I say, it's cost per lead, of course, or cost per acquisition. In our space, it's cost per schedule. Then it's almost like a handoff, if you will, to the office, and we get into the operation side, cost per shown, cost per new patient actually shown up, and then, how much they end up, spending at that dental office. And so while the dentist is going to treatment plan based on truly what your health need is, our job as marketers is, one, to get them there. But the reason you got to understand the rest of that funnel, if all of a sudden you have a breakdown in your call center, the front desk maybe is not answering the phone, and then 30% of the time or more, which isn't uncommon when you talk to some of these dentists. It's like, well, geez, my marketing numbers can't be better because I have issues farther down in the funnel. And so that's why, as marketers, we really want to start understanding that a lot more. Other stuff, you get into social media, AI, kind of how it's helping. And yeah, you're going to get into like, fans and, number of likes and those types of things. This is a brand awareness play. But anything you generally do, you're going to point it right back to the website, the conversion point, to try to get them as new patients. And then I think, outside of metrics, you look at your dental office, your group, and it's like, okay, well, what's unique about you? Like, I get it. You can clean teeth, but so can the 50 other guys up the road over here. So it's like, great, and you talk to the patient, and generally they're not coming to you because they love to get, dental work done. They're not coming to you because they love you, the dentist. It's, are you convenient? Can you get me in? Does it work within my budget? And do you have good chairside manner when I'm there? And, typically they're really fond of the hygienist, and they can be fond of the dentist and go from there. And the smart dentists, they figure this out. Hey, I'll get you in. It's Tuesday at 2:00. Boom, come on in. We'll get you in. Not a problem.
Mm. Are those some of the key things you look at when you think about the lifetime value of the customer, like retention and bringing the person back? Does it really matter how much they like the dentist, or are there certain activities that you can do on the marketing side to be able to drive that as well?
I always say, like, a lot of people have like waited tables, like in their college days usually, or they bartended or something like that.
Right.
So it's the same thing. Right? You and I, we go out to eat and we get a meal. Hey, it can be the most beautiful place in the city here. If the food's garbage, we're not coming back, right? You'd be like, hey, great atmosphere, but the steak was horrible. And so I think, like, I always tell the dentist and stuff like that, like, yeah, you want to have a clean office. It's a healthcare facility. It should be appealing and comfortable to people. Nobody wants to sit in the lobby and see an open mouth with a silver filling as artwork. That makes everybody uncomfortable. But yeah, the truth is like, yeah, do you have good bedside manner? Are you polite and easy to deal with? But the flip side of that coin is, you could be the most polite dentist in the world, be really cool and engaging and everything. If you'd made me wait an hour and a half in the lobby, you just wasted my time. I'm probably not coming back. So that's why I say, like, it's all about, can you get me in? Are you respectful of my time? People are busy these days. Um, and like I said, there's 50 other dentists up the road. And then, yeah, when you look at the lifetime value of it, if you do all these components right, the patient really enjoys their experience, and they say, great, I trust you. Like, I'm going to come back. I am going to come in for my next cleaning and do my 2 visits a year. And you will keep them, they'll be your patients probably for as long as they live in that area, as long as you're taking their insurance.
You brought up an interesting point too, which is that people come in for different reasons. I mean, people are going to come in for their cleaning, but then of course there's going to be Invisalign, which is another product that you can add on to it. So how do you think about these different, I don't even know if we would call them SKUs, but the different offerings that the dentistry can offer, and how that relates to optimizing for the best customers?
Yeah, it's a good one. So there's what, as a marketer, there's, hey, like, we need care, right? Now, the reality is, some people will blow off their dental appointment because they say, geez, my mouth feels fine. I don't need to go to the dentist this year, which is one of the worst things you can do, because dentistry is truly preventative. Mm-hmm. So better to get the cleaning, go in there and check it out and keep it healthy. Because if you come in 5 years later because you neglected it or whatever, all of a sudden that's when the dentist, rightfully so, is saying, hey, look, Zan, love you, but you haven't been to the dentist in 5 years. Unfortunately, I got to pull a couple teeth. I got to do this. Now all of a sudden you got this big, huge medical expense, which people want to avoid that. So that's kind of bucket one, right? Come in, get the preventative care. Goes back to what we were talking about. Make sure you get the people in. It's great environment, easy to book an appointment online, all that good stuff. Invisalign is a little bit more of what we call the cosmetic side. Generally, you don't need that because you have to have it, right? Like, you're going to be able to eat your food even if your teeth are a little crooked. It's more of a cosmetic play. So that's the way we think of it. And there is a trend in dentistry right now. It hasn't really hit the US, but some dentists will do Botox, but like radio frequency, remove the wrinkles around your eyes, around your lips, in the forehead. So they're all cosmetic, and whether you're doing Invisalign or not, that's the way you think about it. Invisalign, great brand recognition, huge marketing machine in the industry. Most dentists know of it, want to do it. There's some other brands out there that are competitors to it. As a marketer, I'm going to target you more from a ego standpoint, more from an appearance standpoint. Very similar to how a beauty salon might do it, initially top of funnel. It's the before and after. Before I was fat, now I'm thin. So before my teeth were bad, now they're really pretty. Um, and there's a retail flow you can kind of do with inside an office too to just make that patient, well, great, you're here for your cleaning today. Did you know we offer Invisalign? I see, you got a couple teeth. We could move that around. It'll only be a 6-month treatment. By the way, it's $500 off today. That's kind of how that one works.
Got it. So you're bringing people in sometimes for things they already have to do, and then there's an offering on top of that.
There's really two ways. It's either you're there already,
Right.
and the chair side conversation. As marketers, we can message that to you in the office. Maybe it's, we're sending some emails and text to you before you come into the appointment because you're our current patient. Then there's the other side of it. You've never heard of us. I'm out there, social media, digitally, maybe even direct mail, etc., telling you, hey, come to this office. We do the Invisalign treatment here. This, maybe we'll get a free scan, and we have an iTero, it's the name of the machine in there, where we can scan it and we can actually show you what your smile is going to look like in a matter of minutes. So there's different cool things like that you can do. People have it on the website, take a photo with your phone of your current smile, upload it, and then it shows you what your smile in theory would look like. So there's things like that, but yeah, it's either they're there already because of the treatment they need, or you've never heard of us and we got to get you into the door.
So it sounds like both when you're telling people about the fact that care is preventative, and when we're talking about this different thing, which is the cosmetic side, there's a layer of educating the customer, right? How do you understand what we're really doing in this industry? And so how does that relate back to the content that you're creating and how you think about that?
Yeah, content's key right now. So, and I don't know if a lot of dental groups do it very well at this point, but you nailed it. It's education. And I think it's a couple of things. It's, education about preventative care. This is why it's important to you. But people don't want to be bombarded with dental news 24/7. So, there's other stuff, right? It's here's what this office maybe is doing in the community. Here's how we support the community. Maybe it's sponsoring the T-ball team in a small town or a church. Maybe it's you're setting up the booth outside of a big fair or something like that in the city. There's the personality of the doctor. Maybe why I should go to him or her. You can take all that type of content and you really got to start getting it out there now. And social media just has rapidly changed. Same thing, last 5 years. People used to kind of, mock TikTok 5 years ago. Now it's a massive beast. The younger generation, they're going on TikTok to search there. We have the Gen Z generation underneath that's going to Chat GPT and stuff. They're doing their searches there. They're not necessarily going to Google. So I tell our offices, hey, we can film long form content. Send a professional crew in there. You got a smartphone. People love authentic, hey, great, show me a smile review. Let me see your new smile for the first time you're seeing it. It can be really emotional for people depending on the work that they're having done. But you want to take that content with the education content, build essentially your brand around it. You need to serve that up in multiple ways in social media right now. And then when I look at, where I think it goes in the next year or two, and it's be interesting how it works in dental. But live social selling is really big overseas. So it's QVC on social media. So they do it with t-shirts and water bottles and stuff like that. I think that could morph into, great, come on in, we got Invisalign, the doctor showing how to do the treatment right there on the spot. The first people that buy 500, 10 cases, let's say, of the Invisalign treatment, or maybe it's, whitening stuff off the shelf. But eventually, social media morphs in that direction and Gen Z's doing it. We got to pay attention.
So when you're running against all these different channels, and particularly when you have educational content going out there, some of it being impact, some of it being in direct channels where you can really understand the attribution. But then you also mentioned channels like direct mail, where maybe that attribution is a little bit more difficult. How do you think about layering in a data system to be able to track this? What's the best practices to be able to say, hey, in this space, we know where to spend the money in the way to optimize for growth?
Build your foundation right. So no different than if you and I were to build a house and we bought an old house, we built it brand new. You got to build the foundation right, or you got to fix the foundation. So a lot of these dental offices, dental groups, when you talk to them, like you said, it's Generally, they can kind of figure out Google, and hey, it tracks through Google Analytics. They might even have Google Tag Manager set up. Totally cool. Direct mail, they'll kind of be like, well, I ask patients when they come in how they hear about us, but there's an inherent error level in that. But if you build your foundation right and you use your QR code and you set up the landing pages, you can track most media. Like I can't really track a billboard. Nobody really whips down the highway and writes down the phone number. Unless it's like 1-800-SMILE and you just remember it. But most of these other things, you can track it right. So it's going to start with, again, top of funnel. What are you using? What CRM does it go into? In our world, we call them practice management softwares. Essentially, once they're a patient of record, what do they get into? And then throughout that whole kind of stack, what technology are you using to start to track these things? So like, give you an example. There's a company called PureLogic out there. What they do is they can track your different media, but they can also, as phone calls come in, and we mentioned missed calls earlier, they trigger a text message out automatically when it's a missed call. So your missed call rate can go from 30% down to 0. And that person, it's an AI software. They can interact with everything. They can talk to you. You build a knowledge base. They can answer anything. What insurance do you take? Where are you located? Do you have an appointment on Tuesday or Wednesday? We can know, hey, you came in off a Google ad. I called the office. Hey, I got the direct mailer. I called you. This software can know it. And if the office doesn't answer or the call center doesn't answer, it still interacts with you and it allows you to book the appointment directly into the practice management software. So like when I think about it, it's, do I build the foundation right? The right tools in place, like again, a PureLogic, perfect tool. Right tools in place so it tracks each of these things that I can do the attribution as a marketer. But then I'm thinking further down the funnel. Is it as easy as possible that I remove as much friction as possible for that patient to book the appointment? So reality is, if it's a missed phone call, what do most people do? They hang up, maybe they leave a voicemail or whatever. If they're looking for a dentist, the truth is whether it's ChatGPT or Google, they're just on to the next person and they're calling. And they're going to book somewhere else. But if I have a software that says, great, I'm going to serve up the text message to you automatically. I'm going to interact with you just like you're a human being. And I can book directly into your practice management software. I don't lose that opportunity with you. That makes my marketing numbers look way better. And it's easier to adjust the ROI, contribution margin back to the organization and say, this is why we're successful.
So we've talked about some of the metrics along, by the way, on that, I mean, I can imagine that having a sore tooth is probably among the top things that will drive you to make sure you get an appointment in today.
Correct.
So and then maybe it's different. Maybe some people who need to do a cleaning can wait a bit, but if you have a toothache, I mean, in my experience, that's pretty urgent.
Yeah, you don't want that.
Tell me a little bit about what people at the board level care about. Like when you're scaling these large multi-unit dentistry locations, they're not talking about impressions, which is what you mentioned earlier. What are the things that they're focusing on to be able to drive growth at that scale?
Yeah, I mean, there's the marketing conversation, but the truth is, even you're a marketer at the board, you're having a business conversation. And almost every single business, I mean, like they're going to talk about EBITDA. What does that bottom line look like? How do we get that bottom line healthier? And what are those levers, whether you're marketing, operations, finance, etc. What are those levers that you guys have that you can pull to make this business healthier? So at the board level, yeah, they absolutely want like the patient care. They want access to care, but they're also running a business and they want to make sure that business is healthy as possible. Obviously, people want to make money. On the flip side, if your business closes, you're not providing care to anybody. So, EBITDA is always a good one. New patient numbers, what is your existing patient retention? Of course, budget, ROI, what does that type of stuff look like? That's going to come up in the marketing conversations. You're going to get into, when you talk about the health of a business, what are we spending on, travel and, like in our world, there's a hygienist shortage right now. And the way it typically works, patient comes in, they see the hygienist first before they see the dentist. If I don't have a hygienist in my office, it's really hard for the patient to get in. So all of a sudden they call in, hey, I'd like to have an appointment. I might have to tell you, oh, geez, I can't see you for 6 weeks. Maybe it's because we don't have a hygienist yet. If I don't have a doctor, essentially the office is dark. And the way that I always explain that back to my college days, it's like when you didn't have a cook in a restaurant, you can't provide food for anybody. Your restaurant's closed that day. So there's always a good view on, time to fill, those types of things in business conversations. But bringing it back to marketing again, new patients, what's your cost per acquisition? Good marketers will understand contribution margin and how to do the profit calculation and to kind of explain how you're keeping your variable costs reasonable and lower. What's the schedule rate? That's always one that comes up. And then, like I said, existing patients, how big of that hole is in the bottom of your bucket and what are you doing to address it?
You mentioned the contribution margin and how that's really a key thing that you want to focus on if you're a CMO in the space that's maybe best in class. What are some of the tactics that you use, in that space to be able to optimize for that metric?
Well, so what's interesting about contribution margin is most of the times when I talk to marketers or even business people, they don't really know how it works, right? So it's really just fixed cost minus variable cost equals contribution margin. So all of a sudden, we talk about the health of the business or, in our world, increase new patients, sell more Invisalign, that type of stuff. It does you no good if I'm out there and I'm like, well, great, give me an extra $1 million to make this work. And that's a variable cost, right? It eats into your profit, basically, your contribution margin. So step one is, as marketers, are we as effective as possible with putting the right tools in place and keeping our variable costs really manageable and reasonable? If we do that, then it's easy for us to go back to the table and say, hey, look, we got really efficient pay-per-click stuff running. We got really efficient social media running. This, I always say water finds its settling point. Hey, maybe it might get $1 or $2 better cost per acquisition, but we're really good. We're in the sweet spot. Now I do need more money from you. But for every $1 I spend, I'm going to make 5. So when my variable costs might go up, my profit line is still growing. Once you understand that concept, it makes it a lot easier to go back and talk about it and get approval to do things. And show that you're keeping the business as healthy as possible. The mistake a lot of marketers make, it's, hey, great, we need 500 new patients. We're not as efficient as we should be, but give me more money so I can go do that. That's really the mistake that they made when you're like, actually, if you become more efficient, you'll save some money. You can put it over here to go get those new patients or launch Invisalign or orthodontics or whatever you want to do. Your numbers still look a lot better. And then you don't need to take more money from the organization because it's going to hurt the organization. But when you're really efficient, you understand that contribution margin calculation, you're focused on the health, you're making sure your marketing's efficient. And when you're asking for more money, you basically built a machine that is a profit machine.
All right, so that allows you to get more money into your marketing machine.
Great, give me 500,000 because 500,000 is going to become 1.5 million for us. It's math that works and people are happy to invest at that point.
Right. And then what we're talking about at this point is really when you have multiple locations that you're going to be investing across, as I understand it. What are some of the things that are important to note when you think about scaling multiple locations, maybe around the idea of how do we drive each location to be profitable? Is that a concept that you guys think is core, or do you focus it on a different view across them all?
Well, so of course you want all your locations profitable, no different than a restaurant or anything else. For us, we're a house of brands, right? Every dental office is a different brand.
Right.
There's other groups where they're the same brand across, all 200 locations or whatever. So for us, the way I always look at it in either model is, one, there's economies of scale. So if we build the right structure in place, the AI social media that I'm doing here at Peak, it's custom to each office. It's unique to each office, but that backbone that we built, that functionality, is the same across the whole network. So we put a tool in place that allows us to serve all 60 offices, but it also allows us to customize it so it's unique to each of them. So when I look at that, part of it's, what's the services that the doctor offers? There's a difference between orthodontist, braces, Invisalign versus general dentist, cleaning, crowns, that type of stuff. In our space, we have some doctors that specialize in just in implants. They're called all-on-4. but they remove people that have, really unfortunately bad mouths. They remove what's called an arch, which is upper teeth, lower teeth. They remove all of them and give you a fake arch, but they screw it in there. Life changing for people. It's huge. It's a big dollar amount. It's like $20,000 plus per arch, but it's a different procedure is really what I'm explaining. So one is when you think about scaling, it's great. How do I build backbone systems that can support everybody and that I can start customizing per office? And then, of course, what services do you offer? What's unique about you and your location? We want to promote that.
Mm-hmm.
And in our world, right, that can be everything from a doctor, instead of running 2 columns, might run 4. That means that he or she can get a lot more patients in for the course of a day. Well, great. We want to know that because we can set up systems, like I was mentioning, Pure Logic, or you can set up your websites where, great, Google found your dental office. I'm going to go to my website. I'm not going to call you to make the appointment. I'm just going to book it right there. That can read into that practice management software and book the appointment for you. So, hey, doc, do you have like a really good schedule where your blocks are blocked out? Because now we know where to put new patients. We know where to put existing patients. We know where to put emergencies at, that type of stuff. A software like Pure Logic can read off of that. Boom, know where exactly to schedule it in for you. So those are the uniqueness things that you want to know about each location. But again, I think the key comes back to, did you build the right foundation and infrastructure to support it? Instead of, well, geez, like I'm doing this social media application over here. I'm doing 5 other at 5 different offices, and I got 10 different logins. I got to go in and try to make this thing work. If you structure the foundation right, you want to be able to service everybody, then just be able to make it unique to them.
You mentioned earlier how there's a number of companies that are in the midst of a roll-up or have been rolled up already. And I think it speaks to a level of sophistication in the industry that maybe wasn't there a decade ago or 2 decades ago. Of course, technology has improved it during that time greatly. So that's changed this whole marketing space. But I'm curious today. So let's say that there's 50, I'm here in Austin, Texas, 50 dentistries around here. How's your understanding of how sophisticated the average of those are? Is there a few players that are really sophisticated and many players that aren't? Is it a very competitive space? How do you think about it?
And from like a roll-up standpoint, and
just particularly around, I guess the roll-up is a roll-up, meaning that I'm assuming some of the roll-ups may have more sophisticated marketing strategies, but maybe that's a hypothesis. Like maybe that's not correct. Like maybe we need to start there and say, what is the sophistication among large players?
So I think it varies amongst the groups. So just for context, make sure we're on the same page, right? So you have groups that come in, and there's groups that might own 10 offices.
Mm-hmm.
And there's other groups that might own 300 dental offices across multiple states. The sophistication, I think, one really comes down to, again, did they lay the foundation right from the get-go? And typically, look, when you're going from office 1 to office 10, or you're acquiring 10 offices to 20 offices, 2 things kind of start to bubble up in that. Hey, we're fast, we're growing, we're moving quick. Typically, you're just bolting systems on because you're trying to grow the business. If I go and I buy your dental group, let's say I have 20 offices, you have 5, and we buy you and bring you in, it's, well, what did you have over here, and how do I move you onto my systems? Or, how do you start to bridge that gap? And then there's a difference between, kind of the first 30, then there's, the next hump is the next 30 to 60, then it's 60 to 100. And within those buckets, you will find different sophistication. And it's going to depend on, again, what phase they were in. Was the marketing person or executive team, were they good? Were they thinking about it? Or were they just kind of doing like, hey, like we've known Google's worked in this space forever, so we just slap in Google and yeah, great, it works. But again, it might not be very efficient. Truth be told, the dental groups I've talked to over the years and I've advised and I still talk to today, I always call, you get a peek under the hood, 9 times out of 10, they're not as effective as they should be. And there's a lot of fixes that need to go in place.
Give me an understanding of just how important is that? Is this a small change in the bottom line, or is this a massive change in the bottom line when it comes to these 9 out of 10 that are running inefficiently?
It can actually be pretty significant, So a lot of times, like when you're at that deal table and you're talking with banks, let's say, or a private equity firm, An attractive piece to it could be is, hey, we're all on the same practice management software. Hey, we're all using the same CRM. We're all using, let's say, HubSpot, for example, or we're all using Go High Level or Salesforce. Because that makes life easier for them. They're saying, great, I'm buying a group. We're gonna bring it into here, and you guys are all on the same system, or you can easily integrate with us. That's a pretty big checkbox for them a lot of times. Other times when you look at it and you're like, okay, geez, like I'm gonna have to put a lot of money in to fix this up. That can really take away from the bottom line. And there's some groups that specialize in buying fixer uppers, others that don't. But it just kind of depends on your approach on it. When you look at it from a marketing standpoint, a lot of the dentists that I talk to or the dental groups, and you're like, hey, let me get a peek under the hood. Let me just see what you got going on. Like when you're delivering the news to them, and it's a very common theme, right? It's like, man, you've been kind of getting ripped off on your Google digital marketing here for the last 5 years. Like cost per lead in your area should probably be $50 to $70 on the Google side. You've been paying about $1.75 for the last 3 years. So all of a sudden, they love getting the intel, but at the same time, you're like, you could have been way more efficient with this. So it definitely impacts the bottom line. It impacts their budget and what they're able to do with it. And when you deliver that news, you can kind of come in and say, great. Good news is everything's fixable. That's the good news. Just here's how we got to go about doing it. They're really happy with going to. Typically, they're like, great. How fast can we get this going? That's usually the question.
Right. And I imagine that the answer to that question is variable, but how long does it really take to turn around the marketing engine when, maybe you could give me an example or a ballpark of how long it would take.
It varies on the group, quite honestly, because, not to beat a dead horse, I keep going back to like, hey, you build the foundation, right? Like, so there's one group that I advise, great group and everything. They were taking all the phone calls by office. They have a really bad CRM system in there. So I told them, I'm like, you have a choice, right? You can leave 40% of your calls missed, or you got to start investing in other softwares. Good news is I can probably pilot a call center through a partner. So there's third-party firms out there. This is what they do. And we can, again, pilot like a Pure Logic in there. And we can get this going for you. It's going to take us 30 to 60 days to fix this piece over here. You're not on the same practice management softwares, which means I can't integrate a CRM into every single one of them. You're going to have to put them on to one practice management software to make your life easier, which means you got to go office by office and do it. And that the office personnel got to get used to the new practice management software. So you don't want to just like rip it out and be like, hey, we're done. Like totally cool. You got a new one. Because they got to schedule patients in there and that type of stuff. That's something where you could have 30 offices and say, got to put you on the same practice manager software. It might take us 6 to 8 months to do that. In addition to layering on the CRM and stuff. So, it all depends on the group and what they have going on. But, that's why I always tell them, like, once we get the peek under the hood, like I said, we can usually diagnose it within a month. And then from there, it's just, here's the plan, the recommendation. What are you comfortable doing? And here's how things can get better for you. It's like when I came to Peak, like they had a lot of good things in place, but we still had to fix the foundation. It took us probably the good first 6 to 8 months to fix the foundation, even though they had some really good things in place. But I just did a call this morning with a doctor, and I'm just like, hey, historically, you guys have never had SEO here. We've kicked that off for you back in November. We put an AI tool in there. And you have social media. And the doctor was like, I've been here for 4 years. This is fabulous. Because, I didn't have any of this. And I'm scratching my head as to like, why can't I have this going for my office? So, and while you're like, hey, just go set up a Facebook page, no big deal. He's like, oh, I want somebody to run it. I want somebody to post it, share the numbers with me. I want to, focus on crowns and how can I promote that? And when you're like, hey, doc, totally do it. Like, let's film some videos. Let's get this going for you. Because the engine's in. Now let's just drive it. As much as you're willing to produce content, we'll promote it for you. And they love it. They absolutely love it.
And I like the concept of creating the engine and then revving the engine up and letting it run. You've mentioned a few times throughout our conversation different uses of AI. And so how do you think about that approach to bringing AI to the companies today? Where do you think it's useful and where do you think maybe it's not useful yet?
Well, so I think that there's two sides of that coin, right? So like half the world or half the marketers right now or business people think like AI is going to take over the world and there's going to be robots everywhere. I don't believe that. I think AI is like the internet of the 1990s. If you're old enough to remember, so there was like world before the internet,
Right.
and when the internet came in, right, like marketers didn't totally get it. Like and there was like you can find like old YouTube clips of it, like, oh, the internet's gonna be a fad and people are always gonna go to the store and shop and go to the malls and stuff. And obviously the world has shifted. You still have stores, people are still going to the malls, but there's a good portion of people going online and shopping and booking appointments and everything. And I think that's what AI is. It's gonna change things. Certain jobs are gonna go away and new jobs are gonna be created. That's the good news. When we look at it from a marketing standpoint in this dental healthcare space, again, I go back to my budget. What can we do more cost effective? So you heard me mention too, really AI SEO that we put in, AI social media. Hey, look, it does the organic, sets up the AI SEO. We had to put time and effort up front to, build it right for each office, etc. But instead of me paying $1,500 to $2,000 per month per location, I'm probably running that tool across my whole organization for the year, probably for 25 grand. And the SEO is doing better than, well, they kind of had like 4 or 5 offices with it before I said none. Realistically, they have 4 or 5, but it's outpacing actually paying somebody to do it. Much more effective for us. So when you look at it that way, like, hey, marketers today, you should be looking at tools to say, great, how can I make my company or my department stronger? And how does this work? If you're not interacting with AI, I tell everybody, it's not going away. It's here to stay. You should be using it in some capacity every day. Go to Gemini, search things, go to ChatGPT, punch up a blog or write an email with it or whatever. But you got to start getting used to it for sure. The other areas where it's morphed into, is video content and production. We still send camera crews out. Hey, go film the doctor, the procedure, stuff like that. Totally cool. But we've played with a girl on my team has really spearheaded this. She's played with it where you can tell that it's AI, but she's getting better with it. Instead of us having to send the camera crew out, we can do a 30-second little spot to do the promotion and maybe cut that down to 15 seconds we want to put on social media. Doc, you send in just videos from your iPhone or photos of your office. We can make that essentially be a tour of your office. We can pop the promotion up there. She can crank out a video now in 30 minutes or less for an office. She's in Colorado. Here you go, office in Austin, Texas. We'll upload it for you. I don't have to send the camera crew out there. Where I think that morphs to in the next 5 years is, I think, me and you and a bunch of other people out there, as AI gets better with the videos, we're going to have a hard time figuring out if it's really authentic people or not. And that eventually probably ties into like the blockchain and stuff like that. But marketers and businesses, right? Hey, great. You can do a lot more video content. I could literally probably show people how to do dental procedures. And then in my head where that morphs to is I can probably do it with the AI in the video, but then I can probably do it like with virtual reality and say, great, come here to the dental office. So we mentioned before, like, see what your smile could look like. Now I can just start morphing that into a lot of things of, hey, not only does dentist do this, but he can fix the wrinkles around your face and do this around here. He can get you those straight teeth. Let's take a look at, we do sedation dentistry. Here's how that works. Like, you can do a lot more with it all of a sudden. And then, like I said, I mentioned Pure Logic before. They can listen to a phone call, analyze it, tell you whether it was a new patient opportunity or not, and whether you missed it. And I can get that recap in about 30 seconds after you hang up the phone. So it's changing the way things are being done for sure.
That's fascinating to think about how fast it could be changing as well. And maybe you can tell me, outside of AI, what are some of the things that you're seeing in the industry that you think might be representative best-in-class practices in the next 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, I think, like I said, if you look around, so sometimes you look at like South America, they got different laws and regulations, like, hey, in dental, what they can do versus here. You look at China, what they're doing. Um, some things that are out there that are best in class. Like I said, I think social media shifts. I mentioned like the live social selling. If I had to put a ballpark, I think in the next year or two, I think that becomes pretty big. In our industry, I think NFTs, things like that start to come into play. I think booking directly online. So a lot of dental offices, it's request an appointment. They're going to be forced to shift to book your appointment directly right now. I think that, even though it sounds really dated, like 10, 15 years ago, but that eventually kind of becomes a reality. I think you'll see a lot more people accepting Medicaid, just kind of with where we're at with insurances and things like that in this country. So offices will shift in that direction. I think from a marketing standpoint, um, content in dental, like a lot of spaces, just becomes so dominant. You're gonna have to really, if you want Gen Z coming to your office, you're really gonna have to figure out how to promote yourself on AI search tools. You're gonna have to really figure out how to promote yourself on TikTok because that's where they're going.
Yeah, it's interesting when I talk to people in Gen Z, the amount of things that they find on TikTok, it kind of blows my mind sometimes. Like restaurants or things that I would never think of using TikTok for, people are using it for every day. And I think that represents this kind of new look at the marketing industry that maybe not all the marketers have quite got on board with. Similar to some people have just not gotten on board with AI yet. Like it's changing one way or another.
Yeah, like I made the statement earlier, right? Like, it's here, it's gonna stay. So like, it's either figure it out and start playing with it, or you're gonna get left behind.
You mentioned Medicare or Medicaid. When you think about the insurance and how insurance plays, is that something that you focus on when it comes to the marketing activities, or is that down the funnel?
No, it's really important in dentistry because you have basically like three buckets almost with dentistry, right? Like, hey, we're an office that they'll say they take all insurances or most insurances. Then there's offices that they're called fee for service that they don't really take any insurances, basically, but it's cash pay, basically. Or there's Medicaid, Medicare. An office could do all three. Typically, they don't. Depending on what that office accepts, that absolutely changes your marketing approach. Um, fee for service technically is a little bit more in a more wealthy, affluent areas. Typically, is where you might find those. So how you target those individuals, the media that they might consume, is going to be a little bit different. Medicaid, it's going to be a little bit of a different demographic there. Same thing, the media that they're consuming, where they're going in the community, you're going to promote and advertise differently. And I have done the Medicaid stuff with a dental group I worked with years ago. One thing, a nugget there for marketers, when you research and you talk to the Medicaid audience, they want no different than what I want for my kids. They want no different what I want for myself. They want to be treated well. They want to get in for an appointment, etc. Where a lot of people screw it up when you market towards that audience is they market to them like they're beneath you. And that's completely wrong. Like it should be, I can get you in for an appointment. We proudly accept Medicaid. We want you here. We want to make sure that, as long as you're committed to getting the care, we're committed to giving it to you. And those smart doctors, those smart dental groups, they really figure that out. It's like there's a way to treat that audience because a lot of places where they go, they get treated poorly. Right? You just give them that great experience, like, hey, same experience I want for me and my kids. And that's one. The insurance ones, a lot of people have insurance. You're going to market there, and that's probably less, on the social demographic side. That has more to do with great what audience surrounds my office. You take a bunch of insurance. If it's a lot of insurance and it's in a small town, there's a way to do that. A lot of insurance and it's in the big city, there's a way to do that too.
I think what you mentioned is really important because, when it comes dentist, it can be expensive. Like going to the dentist can be expensive. And if you don't have insurance that's covering it, particularly if you have kids and they have to get braces, I mean, that can be thousands of dollars that you're spending. And so whenever you have a demographic of people you're spending a lot of money or a lot of the money they have to be able to purchase the good that you're serving or the service, it represents, hey, how do you really treat them the right way, to be able to say, hey, we understand, we can bring that comfort in, because I think that makes a huge difference in the experience of the person who's going to be purchasing those services.
Correct.
Can you tell me any stories of that you've unlocked growth? So like in your past, maybe in the last 5-10 years, I think you said 14 years you've been working in this space. Did you ever have an aha moment where you were looking at the data and you saw something, you're like, we thought it was this way. Now, when we've revised our look at it, we believe it's this way. And after executing against that, you're able to scale a lot.
Yeah, there's a couple in there. So if you go back to the beginning, when I first got into it, Invisalign was kind of newer. And we had to figure out how to roll that out throughout the organization. So a lot of people think, hey, great, you just opened the dental office, or you just tell me you offer Invisalign, and good, people should start buying Invisalign, go run your ad. And it didn't really work that way. And so aha number one was, why are we struggling so much with this? And I think at that point we had like 200 offices or so, something like that. It was a different dental group. And so it dawned on me really fast that there was a couple things that we had to kind of get in place. To your point, what was that aha moment? I was talking to an orthodontist in our group, and they're like, orthodontists should only be doing Invisalign, nobody else. So the big aha moment was there, why were orthodontists so resistant to it? Because the general dentist can do this procedure. And, why would an orthodontist in our group not want the general dentist who's a part of our group to be able to do this? So, basically what we had to figure out is, training and getting the doctors on board was key. And then getting the head orthodontist to endorse it, really go kick the tires, if you will, on the Invisalign product, make sure they like it. And then come up with a way that when we went from city to city that we were in and put on these big training demonstrations, and had the head orthodontist present it, etc. And then we just really started to track, who was doing it, who wasn't doing it, and then a lot of marketing support with it. And then the second aha moment out of that example was once the bell clicked for them of how to present, because it was really just a comfort of treatment. And I'm not a clinician, so that's why the head orthodontist was the key. But once they were comfortable and they knew that there was somebody I could reach out to, this head orthodontist, to ask questions, because I'm a GP. Maybe I'm a little nervous doing it. Maybe I got a question. Maybe the mouth was a little more complicated before. But once we built that path for them to be able to do it, it clicked for them. The comfort level went up, and then the numbers went up. So that was the good news, right? But it had less to do with marketing, more of, I would say, cultural and training, and just realizing, they're very smart people, they're doctors, they were not going to raise their hand and say, I'm not comfortable doing this procedure. Like human nature was like, I'm not comfortable, so I'm just not going to do it at all. But I'm not going to tell you. So, that was one. The other was, I remember walking. So when you're in these roles, typically you should go visit the dental office, and you walk through all of them. And at a certain point, you're like, I've seen one dentist office. I feel like I've seen them all. But it's no different than like you and I going to a grocery store. So I remember being like, okay, so you come into the dental office. I sit in the lobby. Great. Somebody comes back and they tell me, Ryan, come on down. Then you walk down the hallway. Then they put you in the operatory. Hygienist comes in, does her thing. Doctor comes in, checks your teeth, gives you your gold star. Then you walk back out and you book your appointment for the next appointment. You're done. And it's just repeat, 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 repeat. And I toured like 300 so dental offices in 1 year. And I went back to work. I remember telling my boss, the CEO, and I said, there's a retail flow here. No different than when we go to the grocery store, right? Milk's always in the back, right? Because it's a common item that everybody has to get. They put it in the back on purpose so that when you get your milk, you might grab some eggs. And as you're walking back out, you might get a couple other things. So I told him, I said, as much as we're selling services and care, we got these cosmetic procedures like we keep talking about Invisalign here, and there's other ones. Smile makeovers, etc. And I said, but we're also selling like, whitening kits and, electric toothbrushes, etc. So I told him, I said, I think there's a psychological retail flow here, and we can probably increase the number of services because it's patient education, and we can probably, increase retail sales. So we partnered with Procter & Gamble at the time and came up with this whole flow based on research, where people walk in, where do their eyes go, and what do they look at, where do they feel comfortable, and all this other stuff. So the big aha moment there was there's absolutely a flow to it. inside a dental office, there's a way to market to the patient at different areas to either make them comfortable to talk about their issue or to get them to be more receptive to receiving other stuff. And so we really figured that out. And then when you looked at the numbers, I think like our retail sales, like retail products, like electric toothbrush and stuff, like Procter and Gamble loved it because I think that grew by like 20, 25% in year one. And then we saw an increase in, treatment acceptance. So treatment plans, doctor tells you, hey, this is what you should get. Patients might be like, I'm not going to get all of that, but I'm going to do some of it. But we saw an uptick in, treatment acceptance rates. I don't remember what the exact number was. And then that cosmetic care, that Invisalign, the smile makeover, the teeth whitening, like we saw that was like in the 18% in year one increase. So it was a lot of work that went into it, but it was great numbers. And then, then you do the back loop on it, right? You survey the consumer. Did you really like it? Stuff like that. And the feedback came back great. It's great. I feel really comfortable, here, and they're addressing my concerns. And like a nugget for you here is like people don't want to talk about their dental issues in the lobby. They don't want to go to the front desk and really talk about it. They want to talk about it in the operatory. But you can give them education in the lobby where they'll research it on their phone or something like that. But you can give them like a photo book, or remember those old school photo books where like the mouths were all torn apart. I made the comment, like, nobody wants to see a silver crown hanging on the wall of somebody's mouth. They're like, oh, that completely makes me uncomfortable. Like, it makes me want to leave the office when I see that. But when I'm in the operatory, I want to talk about it. So, we were one of the first to kind of say, great, we should put a TV in the lobby, entertaining content, splash in every once in a while a dental ad, really family-friendly artwork of what we're doing in the community, photos of people around the community in the lobby, not tons. And then down the hallway, it's really doctor certification, any special certifications, degrees, community stuff, like here we are with the church, making meals or whatever. But in the operatory, that's where they do truly want to be like, man, like, I don't know, like my breath really stinks. This tooth's rotted out back here. They want to have that conversation. And then that way the doctor or the hygienist can really get in and say, I'm glad that you told me, because let's talk about the treatment that we need to get you.
Well, I appreciate the nuance of that answer. And I think that it's clear that you're both passionate about what you do, and that this has been a masterclass, if you will, on how to scale dentistry. So I want to thank you. And this has been amazing. I hope to have you back for future episodes as well.
Great. Thank you. Awesome. Appreciate it.